Hello friend, welcome and welcome back. After watching this video to the very end, I'm quite sure you have no problems making and baking a perfect signature red velvet cake. Yes friend, in this video, I'll be going through the different procedures I've used in making my signature red velvet cakes over the time. I'll be pointing out the do's and don'ts. I'll be pointing out the flaws in every single recipe and eventually arriving at the best procedure and the best recipe in order for you to achieve at a perfect red velvet recipe. So let's grab my phone and let's dive straight into it. So yes, right guys, I've tried out this particular recipe 3 different times, trying out different procedures. And the first procedure that I used, the same recipe, right? But then the third one I used and I tweaked the recipe a little bit further. But this particular, so let's go through the video one after the other. I will explain the do's and don'ts. I will explain how the texture looks like the mark. I'll give you the mark on a mark of 1 to 10. I'll give you the do's and don'ts. I'll give you what I suggest about the recipe and how, if you will opt in for that, the best way to go about it. So the first one is this one right here. So in this particular video right here, I started it's quite a while. Like I did this video. It was the first one I did, and it was very, very lovely, right? So in this particular one, how did I do it? Now, don't mind my face here. So I added in my buttermilk first, like into the mixture. I added in my buttermilk, like the normal way. I did. Okay, yeah. So I added my buttermilk. For those that don't know how to do buttermilk, like if you don't have buttermilk in the store, it's very, very easy. You have your normal neutral milk, and then you add like 1 cup of milk, and then you add in 1 tablespoon of your white vinegar or lemon juice into your milk. You stir it and let it set aside for about 10 minutes, and then your buttermilk is ready. So I have my buttermilk ready here already. What did I do next? I added in my red food coloring. So it's basically me prepping my wet ingredients from the base, right? So after adding my red food powder, I meant to say, I love using powder. I personally love using an excellent brand, excellent blend brand. I don't know if you have it around you, but then if you do, that is my recommendation because the red is perfect, right? So then after that, I added in the flavor. Like I added in the flavor into the milk mixture. Like, I added the milk, the red food coloring, and also my flavor. Then I moved on to stir that aside and set aside, just normal way. Then I started prepping my wet ingredients practically. So in this particular recipe, I found out that it took me a lot more time adding oil, egg together. I added in the wet ingredients, which was the initial milk mixture into this one. Like I mixed it together with the sugar. Now the reason why I added in the sugar was because I noticed that most times when you add in your sugar at the last end, like when you add in your sugar at the end, like to the dry ingredients, it tends to have a little bit crispy outside. Why? Because the sugar did not dissolve completely and it starts to crystallize once it's set into the oven. So I advise that you don't go for this particular one. Like you add in your sugar together with the dry ingredients so that you're going to mix it up together, and then afterwards now add in your dry ingredient. Now let us see. I added in my dry ingredients, my baking powder, my baking soda, my cocoa powder, my salt, and I combined and set aside. Yeah, I did a combination of these two together and I combined it and set aside into a particular bowl. That is just because I noticed that like making the dry first and then the wet then and now combine it together is a bright and it's a much more lovely experience, and it makes like it has a lovely texture at the end. However, the do okay, yeah, and after that I just baked it in the oven. You can see how lovely the what is it called is. You can see how lovely the texture, like the how glossy the batter was at that point, and it was very, very easy for me to just walk myself around it. I baked it in a square tin. Now, here is where this recipe got me caught, right? When I finished baking it, I noticed that I had a little bit egg taste in the recipe. So that is why I had to try it out the second time and now opt in for the second one. So now let us see what it looks like trying out the third recipe and the second recipe. Now, here comes the second recipe. The second recipe is quite lovely, and I would say this is my total recommendation. I don't know why, but then it's just lovely enough. So it's just like okay, this is how we can go about it. So I don't know if we can, okay, now let's go. So this one is quite easy. I made like I make the red velvet normally as I would make it. Like I make the buttermilk mixture first. Then I added in sugar, oil, egg. Like I did not add in my, so at this point in this particular one, you don't add in your dried ingredients. Like you don't add in your red food coloring into this one. The reason is because I noticed that at the end of the previous video, like the previous procedure I used, it was a little bit tangy and the red was not totally mixed in. Why? Because it was getting into the batter with the egg, right? So this one was very, very easy. You make your buttermilk and you set aside. Then I added oil, sugar, egg together. You can see this is me adding the oil, and I added in the vinegar. In the last one, I did not add vinegar into the butter itself. I only used the vinegar in the buttermilk. So the baking powder did not really have a lot more time to get more into it, right? So after that point I added in the, what is it called? I added in okay. After that point I added in, so sorry, I added in the flavor and the red velvet powder. Then I mix that mixture together. It is the mixture of my egg, my red food coloring, my flavor, my vinegar, and my egg. I mixed that thoroughly. It was perfectly incorporated. Then I now made another mixture separately for my dry ingredient, which is my flour, baking powder, baking soda, and also my cocoa powder. In the last recipe, I added in cocoa powder alongside with the dry ingredients also. But in this particular one, I did not add in, like I did the all separately and also the other mixture too separately. So it was very, very easy for me to go around the whole thing, right? Then I combine it together. Now, this is what you need to do. This is what I really noticed about this particular recipe, right? So at this particular recipe, you add in a little bit of your wet into, like, a little bit of your buttermilk into the wet, and then you add a little bit of dry. So you alternate between the two as the time goes. Like you do half of the milk, half of the buttermilk, half of the dry ingredients, half of the buttermilk, half of the dry ingredients. That's how you're going to go through it all up to the end, right? That is just because, yeah, as you can see right here, that is how it works. So another thing I noticed now, okay, that I'm talking about that as the safety tips at the end of the video. By the way, sweethearts, there are lots of other videos on this channel exploring income, influence, and impact. So if that sounds interesting to you, which I'm sure it is, kindly subscribe right now and click the notification bell so that you won't miss out on any of the future uploads. Also, if you're getting value and feeling the vibe from this adorable content, make sure you click the like button and also drop a comment below. Let's continue. So then you just fold it in, and I baked it in the same thing I baked it in, and look at how perfect that particular cake looks. Now let us now move on to the do's and don'ts and the safety tips to this recipe, right? Now the first thing is try as much as possible to whisk up your eggs very, very well. This is very, very important because once you don't mix your egg very, very well with the sugar, with the flavor, with the oil, with the sugar, it tends to have an eggy taste at the end of the day. And also, for those that are having issues with domey cakes, like there are particular red velvet cakes that will have a little bit of dough in the middle. That is just because you did not mix up your recipe. You did not mix up your wet ingredients very well at the beginning, right? Assuming you mix up your wet ingredients very well at the beginning, there's every tendency that what you will not have this kind of problem. Now, assuming you did that, so once you add in your dry ingredients into your wet ingredients, like once you are mixing it together, you don't want to whisk. No, you don't whisk together. You only try to fold it in till everything is well incorporated. This is because flour has flour has gluten in it, and once it gets in touch together with egg and wet ingredients, it tends to get activated already before even it starts baking, right? So that is why you need to make sure you are folding it in and you are not whisking it rigorously. Another tip or another safety tip is once you are baking this kind of recipe, try as much as possible to bake it on medium heat. Why? Because this is an oil-based cake. You don't want to bake it on fire heat like normally for butter-based cakes, and that is just my recommendation of this particular red velvet recipe. So let us go through the third way. This is the perfect one also. I went through this, like this third one is like the first one as well. I mean, it's like the second one as well. Let's see how that goes. I baked this one in the mug, and a lot of people have been asking me, how am I able to bake this cake in the mug, right? So it's very, very easy. Baking in the mug is quite easy. All you need to do is just make sure, for those that are using oven, or you are using your stove method, it's quite easy. You can do the both. I've tried using the both, and it was perfect, right? So the only thing is just for you to do is, you're using the stove method. You place your cup into a stainless bowl first before you now place it into the pot. Okay, there is a link right here showing how I bake my bread without an oven using just the stove method. So you need to go through that particular method as well to achieve this point, right? So it's very, very easy. Let us see how this goes. Can you see now? Let us see how this goes. This is the recipe we are trying out here. You can see I followed a part of the first beginning, right? So you do the oil, you do the flavor together with that, you mix it together, you add in that one into that one. You can see this particular one is very, very lovely. Then you add in your dry ingredients, your cocoa powder, your baking powder, your salt, and all of those things. All the recipes are totally the same thing. I did not change anything, which is only that in this particular one, I increased the oil. Why? Because I'm baking this particular one inside the cup, so it needs a little bit more of moisture to give it a rise, right? So thank you very much for watching this particular video. I think at this point you'll be able to make a perfect red velvet cake, and I've spoken about any problem if you're having. Now, for those that are having problems having domy cakes or lower cakes, drop a comment right now below in the comment section if you want me to talk about how to avoid making domy cakes, or how to avoid the middle circle, or you have unbaked red velvet cakes, or you're having issues with cakes. So I think that is much more enough. Thank you very much for watching. Follow your joy, I love you. I'll see you right here in this video where I explored, or I did a recommendation of my vanilla cake recipe. Thank you very much, I love you. Mwah.